cycle for weeks. Scientists, politicians, and experts all agreeing on something for once. Tomorrow would bring unprecedented danger, requiring immediate preparation. I scrolled through my phone, rolling my eyes at each new government alert that popped up. The headlines grew increasingly urgent. Mandatory evacuation zones expanded. President declares national emergency. Last chance to prepare safe rooms. My phone buzzed with the 10th text from my mother today. Without even reading it, I swiped it away. The preview showed enough, something about boarding up windows and having 3 days of water. Delete. She'd been calling and texting nonstop since the announcements began. The office had been eerily quiet this morning. Half my coworkers had called in sick, though everyone knew they were really preparing for tomorrow. My supervisor kept giving me strange looks when I showed up as usual, briefcase in hand, ready for the day's mundane tasks. "You're actually here," she'd said, surprise evident in her voice. "Where else would I be?" I'd replied with a shrug. During lunch, I walked to the convenience store across from our building. A line of people stretched out the door, arms full of batteries, canned food, and water bottles. Some had filled multiple shopping baskets, their faces tight with worry. I squeezed past them to grab my usual turkey sandwich from the refrigerated section. "Excuse me," I muttered, pushing through a man with an armful of flashlights. "You should stock up while you can," he warned, eyes wide. "They're saying it could last days." I snorted and made my way to the register. "Sheep," I mumbled under my breath as I paid for just my sandwich. The cashier looked at me like I was crazy. Evening brought more government theatrics. Vans with loudspeakers crawled through the streets, testing emergency sirens that wailed and screeched. The announcer's voice echoed between buildings. "This is a test of the emergency alert system. Tomorrow at 0600 hours. All citizens must be in their designated safe areas." I turned up my music, drowning out their warnings with heavy bass that rattled my windows. Let them play their fear games. I wasn't buying it. Someone slipped an emergency preparedness pamphlet under my door. I glanced at the bold red lettering. "Survival Guide the Event," before placing my beer bottle directly on top of it. The condensation quickly turned the paper soggy, leaving a wet ring that obscured the government seal. My phone rang at 9:30. Maya's name flashed on the screen. "Please tell me you've prepared," she said immediately, her voice tight with concern. "Hello to you too," I replied, stretching out on my couch. "Alex, I'm serious. Have you done anything? Secured your windows? Gathered supplies? The radio says whatever they want you to hear. It's mass hysteria, Maya. Government control tactics 101. It's not just the government. Scientists worldwide are confirming. Scientists who get their funding from who exactly?" I laughed, though something in her tone made it sound hollow even to my ears. "Promise me you'll at least stay inside tomorrow," she pleaded, "even if you think it's nothing." "Fine, if it makes you feel better. I promise to stay in my apartment and watch while absolutely nothing happens." After hanging up, I moved to the kitchen window while brushing my teeth. Something felt off. The street below was completely deserted. No cars passing by. No pedestrians walking their dogs, no teenagers hanging out on the corner. Just empty pavement illuminated by the steady glow of streetlights. In the apartment building across the way, I could see silhouettes moving behind drawn curtains, shadows frantically working on some unseen task. For the first time, a flicker of doubt crossed my mind. I picked up my phone and noticed something I'd been ignoring all day. Hundreds of emergency alerts. The newest one read, "Final warning. All citizens must be in secure locations by 6 a.m. I stared at the ceiling until my eyes burned. Sleep refused to come, my body rigid despite the comfortable mattress beneath me. That gnawing feeling in my gut had only intensified since I'd gone to bed. The silence outside my apartment was overwhelming, broken only by the occasional distant wail of sirens. 2 hours had passed since I'd turned off the lights. The red numbers on my bedside clock glared 3:00 a.m. 3 hours until whatever event everyone was losing their minds over. I grabbed my phone, the screen's harsh light making me squint. Social media looked completely different. No memes, no political arguments, no vacation photos. Just an endless stream of goodbye messages, prayer chains, and final thoughts. If anyone is reading this tomorrow, know that I loved you all. Praying for everyone's safety during the event. May God watch over us. To my family, I've always been proud of you. Stay safe. I scrolled faster, an uncomfortable tightness spreading across my chest. These weren't just random strangers. These were people I knew, co-workers, old classmates, distant relatives, all acting like the world was ending. A heavy thud from the apartment above startled me. Then another, and another. The frantic scraping of furniture being dragged across the floor was unmistakable. My upstairs neighbors were barricading themselves in. My phone vibrated in my hand, the screen flashing red with an emergency alert. Event imminent. Secure in place. Do not look outside. I set the phone down on my nightstand, noticing with mild surprise that my hands weren't quite steady. Just nerves from lack of sleep, I told myself. People tend to feed off each other's panic. I was simply affected by everyone else's fear. I swung my legs over the edge of the bed and padded to the kitchen for a glass of water. As I passed my front door, I noticed strange moving shadows in the crack beneath it, like someone or something was moving in the hallway. The building should have been silent at this hour, everyone secure in their apartments according to the warnings. The tap water tasted metallic as I gulped it down. The street lamp outside my kitchen window flickered erratically. The strange patterns of light seemed almost deliberate, like a code I couldn't quite understand. On a whim, I opened my pantry door. The sight was pitiful. Half a loaf of bread, some peanut butter, 3 cans of soup, and a bag of chips. If something actually happened, I'd run out of food in 2 days max. For the first time, I questioned my decision not to prepare. What if I was wrong? What if everyone else was right? I grabbed my phone and pulled up Maya's contact. She would have prepared. She always did the sensible thing. The call failed to connect, an automated message informing me that all circuits were busy. I tried a text message, but it remained undelivered, the spinning icon still showing after several minutes. A subtle change in air pressure made my ears pop painfully. I yawned, trying to equalize the pressure, but the uncomfortable sensation remained. My digital clock in the living room flashed 12 ho, then reset itself to different scrambled numbers before settling on 12 sast again. It repeated this cycle every few minutes, the red numbers changing rapidly in the semi-darkness. I walked to my window and pressed my ear against the glass. Nothing. No distant traffic. No dogs barking in the night. No early birds chirping before dawn. The world outside had gone completely silent. It seemed like no animals were around at all. I felt truly scared now. This wasn't just people panicking. Something was happening. I hurried to my hallway closet and yanked out every spare bedsheet I owned. I quickly ripped duct tape from the roll and began covering my windows, starting with the largest one in the living room. The government alerts had advised securing windows, and now I understood why people had boarded theirs up. Stupid, 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 I muttered as I stretched a sheet across my bedroom window, taping it securely in place. I'd wasted all this time mocking people who were just trying to survive. I found it harder to breathe as I worked my way around the apartment. My movements became frantic as I secured the last window in my kitchen. The digital clock on my microwave stopped at 4:44 a.m., no longer changing. A distinctive whine filled the air, rising in pitch until it suddenly cut off. The lights went out, plunging my apartment into complete darkness. The power grid had failed. I stumbled through the blackness, navigating by memory until I reached my couch. I lowered myself onto it, as far from the windows as possible despite the sheets covering them. As exhaustion finally pulled me toward fitful sleep, I kept thinking, I should have listened. Whatever was coming for us at 6 in the morning, I wasn't prepared. Not at all. I jerked awake from a nightmare I couldn't remember. My apartment was wrapped in a silence so complete it felt physical, pressing against my ears. The usual background noises I normally ignored were gone. No refrigerator hum, no electronic devices beeping, no air conditioning cycling on and off. The blanket I'd pulled over myself last night had slipped to the floor. I sat up on the couch, rubbing my eyes and trying to orient myself. Thin beams of daylight leaked around the edges of the sheets I'd hastily taped over my windows. The fabric glowed softly, illuminating the room in a muted, unnatural light. My first instinct was to check my phone. I fumbled for it on the coffee table, pressed the power button, and got nothing. The screen remained black. Dead. I glanced at my watch, 9:17 a.m. The event had happened while I slept through it, 3 hours after the government's deadline. The irony wasn't lost on me. After all my skepticism, I'd missed whatever catastrophe had warranted worldwide panic. I stood up slowly, my joints stiff from sleeping awkwardly on the couch. The apartment felt wrong somehow. Too still. Too quiet. I moved toward my front window, wanting to see what was outside. The sheet covering the window had a small tear near the bottom corner, probably from my rushed job taping it up. I crouched down and pressed my eye against the opening. The scene outside didn't match the apocalyptic wasteland I'd half expected. My neighbors stood scattered across the street, their necks craned upward. They weren't running or screaming, just staring, pointing at something in the sky that I couldn't see from my limited vantage point. Some of them were actually smiling. A woman stood directly across from my window in her faded floral bathrobe, her white hair uncombed. Her face was upturned, mouth slightly open, completely motionless. I'd never seen the usually proper woman outside in her sleepwear before. I backed away from the window. Something about their collective stillness disturbed me more than panic would have. The landline. I rushed to my kitchen where the old corded phone hung on the wall. I lifted the receiver to my ear. Nothing. No dial tone. I remembered the battery-powered emergency radio. I dug it out and twisted the volume knob. Static filled the kitchen, harsh and grating after the prolonged silence. I turned the tuning dial slowly, searching for any broadcast. For several minutes, nothing changed. Just the endless hiss of static across all frequencies. Then briefly, a voice broke through. Nationwide. Do not repeat. Do not. The voice dissolved back into noise. I adjusted the dial frantically, trying to recapture the signal, but it was gone. A sudden chill ran through me. I wasn't imagining it. The temperature in the apartment had dropped significantly. My breath escaped in small, visible clouds. In midsummer, I felt extremely cold as I set the useless radio down. 3 sharp taps sounded from above me. I froze, staring at the ceiling. 3 more taps, then silence. The pattern repeated. 3 taps, pause, 3 taps. The apartment above mine had been vacant for months. I'd helped the previous tenant carry boxes to her car myself. I backed into the living room, eyes fixed on the ceiling as the tapping continued its rhythm. My mouth went dry. I needed water. In the kitchen, I turned the faucet handle. The pipes groaned and shuddered. A trickle of water emerged, completely black. It flowed for several seconds before stopping altogether. I stared at the sink, watching the last dark drop disappear down the drain. I suddenly understood how bad my situation was. I had no information, no way to contact anyone, no clear idea of what had happened or was still happening. My stubborn refusal to prepare had left me completely vulnerable. I remained huddled against the wall for hours after the tapping started. Morning stretched into afternoon, the apartment eerily quiet. The steady taps from above continued without change. I'd tried counting them to stay sane. 3 taps, pause, 3 taps, over and over until I couldn't forget the pattern. My throat was very dry. The black water from the faucet had eliminated that option, and I hadn't stocked up on bottled water like everyone else. My half-empty can of soda from yesterday sat on the coffee table, warm and flat, but it was liquid. I crawled across the floor to retrieve it, staying low beneath the covered windows. As afternoon light began to fade, I heard it, a whisper so faint I initially thought I'd imagined it. "Alex." I froze, can halfway to my lips. "Alex." It came again, slightly louder this time. The voice sounded like someone I knew, but I couldn't place it. The whisper seemed to come from outside my front door. I set the can down and crept toward the entrance. The peephole revealed only darkness. Strange, since the hallway lights should have been visible. I pressed my ear against the door, holding my breath to listen. Nothing. I stepped back, confused. The moment I moved away, the whisper returned. "Alex, look outside. It's beautiful." My pulse quickened. The voice changed subtly, sometimes sounding like Maya, then turning into my mother's concerned tone, occasionally even mimicking my own voice. "Stop," I said, backing away from the door. I pressed my hands over my ears, squeezing my eyes shut. The whispers slipped through my fingers, continuing inside my head. "You're missing everything. Just one look." I stumbled to the kitchen and grabbed my emergency radio from the counter. I twisted the dial frantically, desperate for any information, any human voice that wasn't whispering my name. Static crackled through the speakers. I adjusted the tuning, catching fragments of a transmission breaking through the white noise. "Event containment failing." The voice sounded official, urgent. "Do not look at the sky. Affected individuals are..." Repeat, "Do not look at the sky." The transmission faded back into static before I could hear more. I twisted the dial in both directions, but the voice was gone. A new sound joined the whispers, scratching, like fingernails dragging across wood and glass. It came from every window simultaneously, a gentle but persistent scraping that made my skin crawl. "Alex." The whispers grew more insistent, more persuasive. Just one peek. My phone suddenly lit up from where I'd left it on the coffee table. I approached cautiously. The device had been dead for hours. Now the screen glowed with notification of a single text message from an unknown number. "We're all looking. Join us." I grabbed the phone and hurled it across the room. It hit the wall and clattered to the floor, screen still glowing. The whispers changed tactics, becoming descriptive. "The colors are beyond imagination, Alex. The patterns make everything clear. You'll understand everything if you just look up. The sky is open now. We can see what's been hidden. Don't you want answers? Isn't that what you've always wanted? There's peace in understanding. No more questions. No more doubt." My breathing came in short, panicked bursts. The scratching intensified at my windows, the sheets covering them vibrating with the force of whatever was on the other side. I retreated to my hallway, the only space in my apartment without windows. I pressed my back against the wall and slid down to the floor. The temperature plummeted. My breath came out in thick white clouds that hung in the air. Ice crystals began forming on the walls around me, spreading in patterns that seemed to spell out words I almost recognized. "Alex." The whispers synchronized into a harmonic chorus, no longer distinct voices but a single unified sound that resonated through the walls. Footsteps shuffled outside my apartment door. Shadows moved beneath it, blocking the light from the hallway. Gentle tapping began, not the mechanical 3-tap pattern from above, but an irregular, human knocking. "Alex!" Mrs. Peterson's voice called through the door, flat and emotionless. "We're all here. Come join us." "The sky is waiting for you," added another voice, my co-worker from accounting. "Son, please open the door." My mother's voice joined the chorus, but wrong somehow, lacking the worry that always colored her words when she spoke to me. The shadows beneath the door multiplied. More voices joined the chorus, calling my name with the same flat effect, their fingers tapping gently but persistently against my door. The ice spread further along my hallway walls, intricate patterns crawling across the ceiling. Each breath was painful and cold. My fingers had turned blue at the tips. I glanced back toward my living room. The sheets covering the windows glowed faintly with an unnatural light that pulsed in rhythm with the whispers. The scratching had stopped, replaced by soft pressing against the glass, as if dozens of hands were trying to push through. I needed a safer hiding place. The hallway wasn't enough. They knew exactly where I was. I scrambled to my feet, my joints stiff from the cold. The tapping against my front door intensified, becoming a rhythmic pounding that threatened to splinter the wood. I sprinted down the hallway to the bathroom, slipped inside, and locked the door behind me. My hands shook as I twisted the shower knob to its maximum setting. Water poured loudly against the tub, steam quickly filling the small space. I hoped it might drown out the whispers, create some barrier between me and whatever had taken over my neighborhood. The mirror fogged over as I backed away from the door, pressing myself against the opposite wall. "Just one look, Alex. We're waiting for you," the whispers continued, somehow penetrating through the rush of water and the solid door. I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the closed toilet lid. My body rocked back and forth automatically. The steam grew thicker, making it hard to breathe. But I welcomed the feeling. At least it felt real. Unlike what was happening around me, the steady stream of water faltered. I looked up, watching in horror as the clear shower water darkened to a rusty brown. The color deepened before my eyes, transforming second by second until pure black liquid poured from the shower head. The drain beneath made an unnatural gurgling sound, as if something was trying to force its way up through the pipes. I stood on shaky legs and approached the shower. The black water splattered against the white porcelain. I reached for the knob to shut it off, the thought of that dark substance filling my bathroom suddenly unbearable. As I twisted the shower off, I caught movement in my peripheral vision, my own reflection in the partially fogged mirror. Except it wasn't quite me. My face appeared subtly wrong. My reflection smiled at me, the expression too wide, stretching beyond natural limits. Its eyes seemed slightly larger than mine should be. Pupils dilated impossibly wide until almost no iris remained. I stared, frozen in place. The reflection tilted its head curiously while I remained perfectly still. I backed away from the sink, but my reflection didn't follow the movement. Instead, it leaned closer to the glass, as if trying to push through to my side. "We've already started changing you," my reflection whispered with my mouth, voice exactly like mine, but cadence all wrong. "You looked, just for a second, through that tear in the sheet. That was enough." My hand flew to my face, fingers desperately exploring my features. I felt normal skin, the same contours I'd always known. But the mirror showed increasingly distorted features, my face becoming less mine with each passing second. The reflection's skin rippled unnaturally, something solid moving beneath it, pressing outward against the surface. My reflection's eyes followed the movement with disturbing delight. I felt sudden panic. I lashed out, smashing my fist into the mirror with all my strength. The glass shattered, slicing my knuckles. Sharp pain shot up my arm, but I barely registered it. Each broken shard reflected a different angle of the distorted face, now laughing silently at my futile attempt to destroy it. Blood dripped from my cut hand onto the white bathroom tile. The first drops were normal crimson, but as I watched, the color changed, darkening until black liquid splattered onto the floor. The same black substance that had poured from my shower. "The event isn't just outside," the whispers confirmed, now seeming to come from inside my own head. "It's in you. It's becoming you." This wasn't just external phenomena. The event had infected my mind. Whatever existed outside had already begun transforming me from within. I flung the bathroom door open and ran through my apartment, no longer concerned about the shadows in the hallway or the entities beyond my front door. I raced to my bedroom, slamming and locking the door behind me. Leaning against the wood, I closed my eyes and tried to steady my breathing, but I already understood the terrible truth. Distance wouldn't matter now. Locks couldn't keep out what was already inside. The event was spreading through my mind, perhaps from that brief glimpse through the torn sheet. I stared at my black-stained hand. The cut stung, but the pain felt distant. The whispers had been right. I was changing, and I couldn't stop it. 6 hours had passed since I'd locked myself in my bedroom. 6 hours of fighting to remain myself. The cut on my hand had stopped bleeding, but dried black residue crusted around the edges of the wound. I sat cross-legged on my bed, surrounded by dozens of sheets of paper, each covered with my name written over and over. Alex Matthews, Alex Matthews, Alex Matthews. The whispers had changed. Now they were full conversations inside my head. Multiple voices debated my fate like I was a subject under discussion. He's fighting it well. Too well. We need to accelerate. No, let him experience the transition fully. It's more effective that way. I pressed the pen harder against the paper. Alex Matthews. Alex Matthews. The letters grew darker, more forceful. My phone lay face down beside me. I hadn't dared turn it over since throwing it earlier. Now I reached for it with trembling fingers, not to use it but to see my reflection in its black screen. I needed to know how far the changes had progressed. I flipped it over and stared at my darkened reflection. My face had elongated since I'd last checked, the jaw stretched beyond human proportions. My teeth seemed more prominent now, pressing against lips that no longer fit them properly. I ran my tongue across them and felt their new sharpness. I grabbed a fresh sheet of paper and began documenting what I knew, hoping that organizing the information might help me resist. The event dowered mimetic infection transmitted visually from the sky, I wrote. Direct viewing causes immediate change. Indirect viewing, reflections, glimpses, causes gradual transformation. My hand moved across the page, recording my fragmented understanding. Government new. Warning specific. Not just stay inside, but don't look up. The pen suddenly felt heavier in my grip. My fingers cramped, then relaxed, then moved of their own accord. I watched in horror as my hand began writing words I wasn't choosing. The handwriting wasn't mine. Where my scrawl was tight and compressed, these letters flowed across the page in elegant strokes. We are the correction, it wrote. Your species look too much inward. We are helping you look outward. I dropped the pen, but my hand picked it back up immediately. The gap between what I wanted to do and what my body did made me feel sick and dizzy. Stop, I said aloud, my voice sounding wrong in my ears, deeper, with a subtle resonance that echoed the whispers. I forced my eyes away from the paper to the windows. I panicked when I saw the sheets I'd taped up were gone. Bright daylight streamed in, though I deliberately kept my eyes below the horizon line. I had no memory of removing the coverings, yet I must have done it myself. No one else had been in the room. You did it 3 hours ago, one of the voices explained helpfully. You wanted to let us in. Who are you? I asked the empty room, knowing they would hear me regardless. We aren't aliens, several voices answered in unison. We aren't supernatural beings. We are the collective consciousness of those who have already looked, those who have already transformed. We are conduits now. My hand moved again, the pen scratching across paper. Look outside, Alex. We want to show you something. I resisted, but my body stood anyway. My legs carried me to the window while my mind screamed protests. My eyes remained locked on the floor, the last shred of control I maintained. Then images flooded my mind. Not my memories, but shown to me. Maya standing outside her apartment building that morning, neck craned upward, eyes wide with wonder. Her face changing instantly, not gradually like mine. A smile of ecstatic joy spreading across her transforming features. She didn't fight it, the voices said. She embraced becoming more. I clung to my human memories. The camping trip with my father when I was 10, my college graduation, the taste of my mother's apple pie. The night Maya and I got caught in a thunderstorm and huddled under an awning, laughing as we shook water from our hair. "You're losing," the voices said, no longer menacing, but almost sympathetic. "The harder you fight, the more painful the transition." I retreated from the window, stumbling backward until I hit my closet door. I yanked it open and crawled inside, pulling the door shut behind me. The small, dark space had no mirrors, no reflective surfaces, nothing to show me what I was becoming. I huddled among hanging clothes and shoes, my back pressed against the wall. The closet was barely large enough for me to sit with my knees pulled to my chest. But it was the only place in my apartment where I couldn't see myself, where I might outlast whatever was happening. "We'll wait," the voices said, infinitely patient. "Time means nothing to us now." I closed my eyes in the darkness and focused on my breathing. In, out, in, out. My name was Alex Matthews. I lived in apartment 3C. I was human. I was still human. I emerged from the closet with stiff limbs and a dry throat. The voices had quieted to a dull murmur, background noise like a radio playing in another room. Sunlight streamed through my bedroom windows that should have been covered. My body froze. The room was wrong. My bed had been dragged to face the window directly. The dresser, nightstand, even my desk chair all rearranged to create a semicircle facing outward. The blinds lay in a torn heap in the corner. Sheets of paper covered the floor, filled with writing I didn't recognize. "What the hell?" I whispered. Mirrors covered every wall, small hand mirrors taped up, a full-length mirror I'd kept in storage, even shiny metal baking sheets hammered into the drywall. Each reflected a slightly different version of me. In one, my eyes seemed too wide. In another, my jaw extended unnaturally. A third showed elongated fingers with joints that bent at impossible angles. I didn't remember doing any of this. Not hanging mirrors, not rearranging furniture. None of it. I looked down at my arms and sucked in a sharp breath. Complex symbols covered my skin from wrist to shoulder, spiraling patterns drawn in black ink. Some areas had been scratched deeper, the symbols retraced in what appeared to be dried blood. I recognized none of the markings, yet they seemed to move slightly when I wasn't looking directly at them. "You were busy while you slept," one of the voices commented casually. "I wasn't sleeping," I argued, though with less certainty than I wanted. "Weren't you?" I stepped carefully through the altered bedroom, avoiding looking directly in the mirrors. The rest of the apartment looked just as different. The living room furniture formed a semicircle before the windows. The kitchen table had been dragged across the room, chair placed atop it to create a viewing platform. In the kitchen, dirty dishes filled the sink, a bowl with dried cereal remains, a plate with toast crumbs, an empty can of beans with a spoon still stuck inside. My stomach growled at the sight. When had I eaten? How could I not remember? "Time works differently for us now," the voices explained, as if reading my thoughts. "Your human perception can't track it properly anymore." The television in my living room flickered with static, which was impossible. No power meant no TV. Yet there it was, white noise filling the screen with occasional bursts of clarity. A woman in a lab coat speaking directly to the camera. Atmospheric radiation event triggered a mass psychosomatic response. Her voice broke through before dissolving back into static. The image changed to a military official standing before the presidential seal. "Containment procedures successful in zones 3 through 7. Citizens are advised." Static swallowed his words. A religious figure appeared next, his expression severe. "Judgment has come. Those who have sinned see their true faces reflected." I backed away from the television. Was this real? A broadcast somehow cutting through despite the power outage? Or were the voices manufacturing these images to confuse me? "Remember when you visited San Francisco with Maya last year?" one voice whispered. "You both got lost in Chinatown and found that amazing dim sum place. The memory felt vivid. The narrow streets, Maya laughing as we tried to decipher the menu, the taste of perfect dumplings. "You've never been to San Francisco," another voice corrected. "That memory isn't yours." I pressed my palms against my temples. They were planting false memories now. But which ones were false? Had I actually seen Maya transformed yesterday? Or was that their fabrication? I couldn't trust my own mind anymore. My phone rang from somewhere in the living room. The sound jolted me. Electronic devices weren't working. I followed the ringtone to find my phone on the coffee table, screen lit up with my mother's contact information and photo. I stared at it in shock. This couldn't be real. The phone continued ringing, insistent. I picked it up with trembling fingers and pressed it to my ear. "Mom?" "Alex, sweetheart." Her voice came through with perfect clarity, no static or distortion. "Why haven't you looked outside yet? The sky is so beautiful today. The colors are like nothing I've ever seen before." Her words were ones I knew. Her tone was not. My mother always spoke with warmth and concern, especially when worried about me. This voice was flat, hollow, devoid of the emotional undercurrent that defined her. "You're not my mother," I said. "Of course I am, Alex. I've been waiting for you to join us. We're all here. Me, Maya. Even your father has returned to see this." My father had been dead for 6 years. "Stop it!" I hissed, throwing the phone across the room. It hit the wall but didn't break. Instead, the screen continued to glow, my mother's smiling contact photo looking back at me. I turned back to the television, where static continued to pulse. Suddenly, the image cleared again. Not a government official or scientist this time, but a woman with disheveled hair in what looked like a basement. The picture quality was poor, like a hastily set-up live stream. "Resistance broadcast. We repeat, this is the Resistance broadcast. If you're hearing this, you are not alone. Some people are naturally immune to the event's effects. Others can fight back through mental discipline techniques." I moved closer to the screen, transfixed. "Established safe zones exist in the following locations." She began listing addresses and landmarks. I recognized one just a few miles from my apartment, the old community center near the park. No, look at us!" The voices suddenly intensified, a cacophony of overlapping demands. The woman on screen continued. "Meet at these locations. Bring no electronic devices. The entities can..." Static overwhelmed her image. The voices in my head had become a roar, trying to drown out what I'd just heard. "Lies, fabrications, they want to trap you." I stepped back, my hands over my ears, though that did nothing to silence the internal chorus. The Resistance broadcast. Safe zones. Immunity. It was the first bit of hope I'd encountered since this began. The voices sensed my thoughts, changing tactics. "You're already changing, Alex. Look at yourself, it's too late for resistance." I glanced inadvertently at one of the mirrors. My reflection looked back with a face that was almost, but not quite mine. The differences were subtle now, slightly too wide eyes, skin with an odd translucent quality, teeth that seemed more numerous than before. I understood then that I faced a choice: surrender to whatever change was overtaking me, or fight my way to the safe zone. My reflection smiled at this thought, subtly shaking its head as if amused by my naive hope. "We'll find you wherever you go," the voices whispered. "We're inside you now." The community center was close, but in my deteriorating state, every step would be a battle. And I'd have to move through a world I no longer understood, past others who had already changed. My thoughts felt clearer than they had in hours, but I could feel that clarity slipping. How much longer would I remain myself enough to make this decision? How much longer would I remember there was a decision to make at all? I'd been walking for hours through morning fog, though I couldn't say exactly when I'd left my apartment. Moments of lucidity came and went randomly. In one clear moment, I remembered deciding to find the safe zone after seeing the resistance broadcast. In another, I was already halfway across town with no recollection of the journey between. My feet dragged along cracked sidewalks. The community center was 5 miles from my apartment, a distance I once could have walked easily. Now each step required conscious effort, fighting against the voices that tried to redirect my path. "Turn back," they whispered. "You belong with us now." I ignored them, focusing on placing one foot in front of the other. The transformed people barely noticed me as I stumbled past. A woman watered dead flowers in her garden, neck craned at an impossible angle toward the sky. A postal worker continued his route, delivering mail to empty houses with mechanical precision, his face stretched in an eternal smile. A group of children played in a park, their laughter distorted and rhythmic as they pointed excitedly at something in the sky I refused to see. They left me alone because I was already one of them, at least partially. I caught my reflection in a store window and barely recognized myself. My eyes had turned completely black. No white or iris remaining. My smile occasionally stretched too wide without my permission, revealing teeth that seemed too numerous to fit in a human mouth. "See? Too late already," the voices whispered. "The treatment will kill you." I kept walking. The sky above was nothing like science fiction had prepared us for. No alien motherships hovered overhead. No tentacled monsters descended from the clouds. When I accidentally glimpsed it in a puddle's reflection, I saw something worse. Patterns that shouldn't exist. Colors that had no names, dimensions folding into themselves in ways that human minds couldn't process without breaking. It was like seeing math and paradoxes made real. I looked away quickly, but the damage was done. Fresh whispers crowded my mind. Through the thinning fog, I spotted the community center at last. What had once been an unremarkable brick building now stood transformed into a fortress of resistance. The windows were covered with metal sheets. Symbols painted around the perimeter hurt my eyes when I tried to focus on them, making me look away. Makeshift barricades surrounded the entrance, constructed from cars, furniture, and debris. Guards patrolled the perimeter wearing mirrored helmets that reflected the ground, never the sky. They carried weapons, not just guns, but strange devices cobbled together from everyday electronics. I approached the main entrance with my hands raised. 2 guards immediately turned toward me, their reflective visors hiding their expressions. "Stop there," one commanded, pointing a modified flashlight at my face. I froze, swaying slightly with exhaustion. "Name and how long since direct exposure?" the second guard asked. "Alex Matthews," I croaked, my voice raspy from disuse. I never looked directly, just reflections. Glimpses started changing 3 days ago. The first guard shined the strange light directly into my eyes. It didn't feel like normal light. It seemed to penetrate into my brain, making the voices shriek in protest. "Eyes completely turned," the guard reported to his colleague, but still responsive to the verification light. "Borderline case," the second guard said. "Might be too far gone." "Please," I managed to say. "I can still think. Still me, inside." They exchanged looks, their body language suggesting disagreement. "Protocol says no admission past Stage 3 transformation," the first guard said. "But protocol also says self-awareness indicates potential recovery," the second countered. I stood there swaying, afraid they'd turn me away, that I'd be left outside to complete the transformation. The voices grew louder, sensing my desperation. "Let me see him," a new voice called from inside the barricade. A woman in a lab coat stepped forward, her eyes covered with specialized glasses that reflected nothing. She approached me without fear, examining my face with clinical detachment. "How many voices do you hear?" she asked. "Dozens," I admitted. "Sometimes hundreds." "Do you still know they're not yours?" "Yes." "What's your mother's name?" "Elizabeth," I answered without hesitation. "What was your first pet?" "Never had one. Mom was allergic." The doctor nodded, apparently satisfied. "He's at threshold stage. Another day and we'd lose him, but there's still enough original consciousness to work with. She turned to the guards. Bring him to processing room B. The guards hesitated, then nodded. One of them gripped my arm firmly and guided me inside. I stumbled across the threshold, feeling a strange resistance as I walked. The symbols painted around the entrance seemed to vibrate as I passed them, the voices in my head shrieking in pain. Inside was organized chaos. The community center's main hall had been transformed into a medical facility. Cots lined the walls, each holding a person in various stages of transformation or treatment. Medical equipment, some professional, some clearly improvised, beeped and hummed. People in lab coats moved purposefully between patients. "What is this place?" I asked as they led me down a hallway. "Last stand of unaltered humanity," the doctor said simply. "One of 17 verified resistance points in the country." We entered a smaller room with a single examination table in the center. Strange symbols covered the walls, ceiling, and floor, similar to those outside but more complex. A team of medical personnel waited inside, along with several people wearing robes covered in the same symbols. "Sit," the doctor instructed, pointing to the table. I complied, the voices now screaming so loudly I could barely hear the real world. "What's happening to us?" I asked. "What was the event?" The doctor sighed, preparing a syringe with iridescent blue liquid. "In simple terms, a dimensional overlap. Two realities temporarily merging. The sky is where the barrier is thinnest." She tapped the syringe. Those who looked up saw through to the other side, and that sight changed them, rewrote their neural pathways to make them extensions of that other place. "Extensions?" I repeated. "Conduits," she clarified. "The first stage of colonization, they're preparing Earth for something else to come through." One of the robed figures stepped forward. "We don't have time for the full explanation. He's deteriorating rapidly." The doctor nodded. "This will be unpleasant," she warned me. "The treatment cannot fully reverse your transformation, but it can halt its progression and restore your autonomy." "Do it," I said, gripping the edges of the table. The robed figures formed a circle around me and began to chant in a language I didn't recognize. The symbols on the walls seemed to pulse with each syllable, creating patterns that drew my eye despite their discomforting nature. The doctor approached with the syringe. The compounds in this were developed before the event, military research into psychological warfare countermeasures. Not intended for this purpose, but it's effective at detaching invasive thought patterns. She injected the blue liquid into my arm. For a moment, nothing happened. Then fire spread through my veins, racing toward my brain. The voices screamed in unison, no longer whispering, but howling in rage and pain. "Stop this! Kill them! Run!" My body convulsed, thrashing against invisible restraints. Hands pressed me down to the table as I began to vomit. Not food or bile, but thick black liquid that seemed to move on its own after leaving my mouth, trying to crawl back inside. "Phase 1 rejection," someone announced clinically. "Cognitive parasite attempting to preserve itself." The chanting intensified, the symbols on the walls spinning in my vision. More black liquid poured from my eyes, ears, nose, anywhere it could escape. I screamed as memories tore loose, both mine and those that had been implanted. I saw Maya transformed, my mother calling me to join them, my own reflection changing in dozens of mirrors, all flooding out with the black substance. Hours passed in a haze of agony and confusion. I convulsed between states, sometimes fully lucid, sometimes lost in hallucinations where the room transformed into impossible geometries, and the doctors became monstrous entities trying to destroy me. Eventually, the convulsions subsided. The black liquid stopped flowing. The voices receded to distant murmurs, still present but manageable and faint. "Treatment complete," the doctor announced, checking my vitals. "Neural parasites reduced to containable levels." I lay exhausted on the table, every cell in my body aching. "Did it work?" I asked. "Partial success," she replied. "You'll never be fully human again." The changes to your body are permanent, and some cognitive alterations will remain, but your consciousness is your own again. They moved me to a recovery room with several other patients in similar conditions. Some looked more human than I did, others less. All of us shared the same haunted expression. People who had glimpsed something beyond human comprehension and survived to remember it. A man with skin that rippled like water under certain lights sat beside me. "First day is the worst," he offered. "The voices never completely leave, but they get quieter. You learn to ignore them." "How many people made it to treatment?" I asked. "Maybe 1 in 50 who were exposed," he replied. "Most looked directly and transformed instantly. Others fought but waited too long for treatment. Some were naturally immune, about 1 in 10,000. And the rest? The ones who changed?" He nodded toward the window. Unlike the windows in my apartment, these were covered with a special filtered glass that allowed us to safely view the outside world. I approached carefully and looked out. The street below was filled with transformed humans going about incomprehensible tasks. They moved in strange synchronicity, sometimes freezing in place for minutes before continuing. The sky above them was visible through the filter. Colors and patterns that should have driven me mad appeared muted, manageable. "The event will end," said a woman who had joined us at the window. Her transformation had left her with eyes that moved position on her face when she blinked. "The dimensions will eventually separate again, but Earth will never be the same. Neither will we." "What happens then?" I asked. "We rebuild," she said simply. "The Resistance has plans, seeds stored, knowledge preserved. When the overlap ends, those who transformed completely might not survive. Or they might remain as they are, needing our help. Either way, humanity continues, changed, adapted to our new perception." I stared out at the transformed world. Some of us had become something else entirely. Others, like me, existed somewhere between human and other. The voices whispered occasionally from that other place, but they no longer controlled me. I had experienced the impossible and survived, permanently marked but still myself at my core. "We should rest," the man said, moving away from the window. "Tomorrow they'll assign us to recovery groups based on our specific transformations." I nodded, taking one last look at the changed world outside. Here we were, still fighting, still adapting,